Hello everyone, here we are for episode 3 of The Fool's Journey, Descent into the Tarot, where we discuss the Major Arcana. I'm here with Silas, and today we're going to at least start with the Hierophant and Lover's cards. Hey Silas.
Hi there, how's it going?
All good, yeah, and you?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to this discussion.
All right. So, starting with the Hierophant, I don't know if there was anything left unsaid with the previous cards, if you want to start there, or should we...
I don't think there is. If anything comes to mind, I'll sort of retrospectively mention it.
Okay, very well. So, starting with the Hierophant, I would first like to say that, as a sort of segue from the last one, that this seems to be already, to me, an ascending, slightly ascending curve from the previous low, which was the Emperor. And if we look at it from a sequence, we see the descent of the higher feminine, the priestess, to the lower feminine, the Empress, giving birth to the lower masculine, the Emperor, that then starts to rise slightly, at least, towards the Hierophant. So I think that this is already a bit of an ascending curve. Of course, it ascends and descends all across the journey, but this at least is my idea of it. Now, the Hierophant, we see several symbolisms here that, of course, are also found in the Catholic Church. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, the keys, the papal keys, the gesture of benediction, that I am unsure, and maybe you can clarify, Silas, if this gesture on his right hand is some sort of runic or druidic gesture. It might come from that. And then, of course, a rod with a triple cross, and the headdress that has curiously also been mentioned yesterday in Bach's livestream when we were watching the video about Jordan Maxwell. So also beneath at his feet, let's say, we have two monks, one with red roses, another one with white lilies. I think they're lilies. Correct me if I'm wrong. And what is interesting there as well is that if we recall the Merovingians in France, before France, but you know what I mean, in the territory now that now is France, the Merovingians had a characteristic, which was they let their hair grow long. And the only exception was when one of them would join a holy order. They would shave their hair in the format that we currently see as the friar or monk type of haircut. So with the bald top and leaving only the trims, or whatever you want to call it. So any comments so far, Silas?
Yes, so that hand sign there, I've written extensively on it. I can't remember it all. You have the alchemist's hand, I believe it's called, and it's a sign which was typically, when it was manifested or created, it was typically taken from hanged victims, who there was several processes of preservation that took place to then preserve the hand. I believe it was called the alchemist's hand, or there was some other name for it, either in Latin or French, and I forget it now. But ultimately, it's this idea that you see within the first of the three layers of the Hierophant's priestly crown, which is another symbol of the Orphic egg, and this idea of the world egg. And we see that with the papal crown and the cardinal crowns and all of that as well. But interestingly, at the bottom you have the horned crown, a symbol of Enlil, a symbol of the divine father, essentially, perhaps even the emperor. that sort of masculine symbol. And there are 5 prongs on it. So again, that relates to what we see with, of course, the 5 digits upon the hand. The 5th of the thumb being that which is distinct from the other 4. Again, very similar to the pentacle. The number, the symbol of manifestation, the symbol of man. Of course, the 4 elements plus the 5th, which conjoins all others. Similar, of course, to the pyramid. The 4 points of the base conjoined or meeting within a confluential point up to the apex of the capstone, or the Bennu, or the Ben. The Bennu is the phoenix, but it's related. Another thing to mention as well, it's also the Jupiter Sabazios hand sign, which, and you quite rightly stated, that has sort of carried down as the sign of benediction. It is something you also see on the Baphomet symbol, by the way. So you see it upper and lower on the Baphomet symbol. It's something that appears to be quite replete within Zionist illustrations as well. There's a Zionist guerrilla group from the early 20th century, and that was the sign that they had as well. I believe it was something to do with, or in their conception of it, it was something to do with, oh God, what's his name? With Delilah. Oh God.
Samson,
yeah. That's the one. I can't believe I forgot that. Samson, yeah. So I believe it's something to do with that, or that, again, that's how they conceive of that idea. Another thing to mention is we have the same instance of both the red and white garments.
Right.
So the red, the outer, obviously, is that of passion, that of the East, that of Mars, that of, you could also say, ruination and burden, if you look at Aries, or, A-R-E-S as opposed to A-R-I-E-S, the etymology of that from Greek. So that covers the lunar. White covers the white queen, which is the symbol of limitation and gestation. So the spark will always come first before it's then gestated within the womb. That's the symbolism there. Another thing to mention as well is there is an undergarment of what appears to be a teal or turquoise, or I think it's a symbolism. It fits really with the High Priestess card.
Yes, for the water.
That of water, yeah. So water is the prima materia. It's the mercurial liquid, if you will. It's that which is similar to this symbolic conception of the discharge of potential into energy.
Right.
Again, like the flowing water. And you also see as well that it's something you find, I think, most notably in this piece, which is the Y principle. You see it with the Hierophant, and you also see it with the 2 at the bottom, with you could say, the yellow brick road that's emblazoned or sewn into their garments.
Right.
And this is the principle of the one being bifurcated into its dualistic fragments. So it's the same idea that we see within the water, of the pure potential which is in a singularized unity being bifurcated, differentiated into its dualistic principles, which are then paradoxically pitted against one another, which maintains the homeostatic eternality of the cosmos, or the psychic mechanisms surrounding the cosmos. Another thing to mention as well, you'll notice the rose and the lily of the valley on both individuals, and this is something I think we will see more so within the Lover tarot card. And what this ultimately is indicating is, again, the Red King Hermes, the animus, conjoins with the anima, which is again the female. The animus is the female, the masculine archetype within the feminine psyche, and obviously vice versa with the anima, feminine archetype within the male psyche. So both of them can join and create the whole, which you see within the Hierophant. The Hierophant crown encompasses that, with ultimately, again, the 5 on the bottom. And in the next layer of the crown is the 7. That's the 7 major archetypes, the 7 major planetary genii, all the way
chakras,
up to Saturn,
yeah.
and chakras as well. Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, as well on the Sephiroth, we can't fail but mention that the 7 lower, the conscious manifestations below that of Bina, Hokmah, and Keter, which are the higher supernal qualities.
His hands and the
of
headdress.
That descent.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Keter would be the headdress. Bina would be the right hand. What was the other one? The left hand.
Hokmah.
Hokmah. Yeah, the
Yes.
left hand, and then from then down. Yeah.
Hence the wand, hence the sort of wand structure, and you see the cascade of it with the 3 prongs descending downwards in a sort of a cross shape. You also see 7, and then you have the 3, which again is the Bina, Hokmah, and Keter, and then above that is 3 that are in darkness, if you can see them, and those are the hidden aspects of the Ein Sof hour, which is the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof hour, essentially limitless potentiality, or limitless potentiality within a state of nothingness. Again, it appears as nothing because everything in its singularity form would appear to us, those of perception, as nothing, because perception can only perceive based on delineation or differentiation. And of course, he's betwixt the two major pillars, which further cements this, again, Bina, Hokmah, or Boaz and Yakin. I believe there's something, just quickly to mention, with the Jupiter Sabazios hand sign, or the sign of benediction. This idea of the 2 being below and the 3 being above, I think ultimately, if I recall correctly, I think it's something to do with a Hindu meditation pose. I forget what they call them. I think it's a yonic pose or something with the hands. I forget the name of it but it links, I believe, with Kali, or the Mahakali. So it links with, it essentially links with the same, what we're seeing it on the left hand of severity. So it links with that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing as well is that the pillars are both gray. So they're neither white nor black distinctively, like in the priestess card. I would like to say that it seems to me, in of course a different way, that the Hierophant, now that he is coming out of the lower emperor, he is trying to rise above his lower condition, is trying to mimic his mother, trying to mimic his priestess and empress all in one, in the Hierophant, right? So he's still, in a sense, he's still the emperor, or in this case tries to mimic the empress. He even dresses in a feminine tunic, let's say, that is red, so it symbolizes the power, the rulership. But he is also trying to mimic the priestess, being between the 2 pillars, and trying to raise itself through the mimicry of the feminine that fell. Now, the 2 things that I would like to ask, in addition to this, that I would like to ask you is the significance of him being sitting on a throne that is above what seems to be either a red stone or a red something. And also, if you did you see any connection to what I told you about, what I mentioned about the Merovingians? That the fact, because it seems that the tarot developed, of course, you say Italy, yeah, but it may have come, at least the modern tarot from Marseille, so from the Frank Reich, like the Germanics used to say. And if the Merovingians had a cultural influence in this, because this particular friar monk haircut seems to have originated there, at least in much closer historical record.
I think so. If we look at the Merovingians, when Rome was collapsing, within the Rhone Valley, and again, this would later. This is the reason Switzerland, by the way, has been a focal point of, I guess you could say, geopolitics for millennia, at least since the collapse of Rome. And
the Swiss Guard protects the Vatican, so
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Within the Rhone Valley, Narbonne, Septimania, it was called in those days, you had Jewish influence there. There was Jewish, a major Jewish colony there.
Mm-hmm.
Within the Roman Empire, especially within the Western Roman Empire, that was the heartland of Jewish influence. And moreover, you could imagine that Kabbalism, or at least a primitive form of Kabbalism, was being discussed, was being explored there.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the Merovingians, and we see this with, I forget his name now, but there was a very short-lived king of, I believe he was called the King of Israel or the King of the Jews, that was placed there by the Carolingians, who, by the way, are of course dynastically related to the earlier Merovingian line. And I believe that the Merovingians, again, like most of Europe at the time, most of the European nobility, they were heavily ensconced in this type of Kabbalism. That, of course, took on a new flavour once they actually had the tomes, direct translations within their various local dialects after the Renaissance and after the collapse of Constantinople. But I think there is a connection there. The cross as well, that triple cross. I forget the Merovingian dynasty banners, but that strikes a chord with me. It strikes I recall that is something to do with the Merovingians. Another thing to mention about how he's sitting on the red square, again, you'll also notice where his 2 feet are, and we're now seeing 2 feet as opposed to just one. They both have the crucifix on them. The crucifix essentially is the addition of the fourth point of the Trinity, or what would create the quaternity. This, in essence, is the shadow aspect or the lower aspect of man being brought up or conjoined in sort of I guess you could call it a theosis, a sort of relationship with the Trinity itself. And of course that's why Christianity uses the crucifix now as its main symbol, with the fifth point being that of Christ. You'll notice as well that the feet are white. I think that has something to do with this process that we're seeing through the cards of the Journey of the Fool in a sort of alchemical transmutational way, where he's going through this period of gestation, distillation. He's being purified, if you will. And I still don't think we're past the individual characters, but I think, we get into this sort of processes through the lover, through the strength cards. We're still at the overarching stages through the main characters, from the magician all the way to the Hierophant. I agree. Yeah.
What I was saying about an ascending curve is, if you depict the journey with ups and downs, like every journey has ups and downs, highs and lows. And the first part is clearly a descent. And I think that the first lower point of the journey is the Emperor. And so we're already in the slightly ascending with the Hierophant. That was my point there. I would like to say regarding what you said about the Carolingians, I think, and this is mere speculation on my part, but I think that the Carolingians were the reason for the naming of North and South Carolina in the United States, for example. And in North Carolina, you have, for example, Lake Norman, and Normans were the Carolingians were Normans, right? So I think that this also provides a hint towards the importance of France, or the territory and the cultures that lived in France, to what is going on in the world today. It's given great importance to the English, great importance to Germans, but I think more focus should be given to the cultures in France, because I think that they influenced more than any others, for good or evil, whichever way you want to see it, right? So another thing that I would like to say regarding what you've stated is that the fact that he's wearing white as an inner garment and red as an outer garment could symbolize the mimicry that I was trying to convey, because it would mean that although he is an earthly ruler, which is represented by the red outer garment, he is supposed to be, or trying to be, or pretending to be at least, holy on the inside, right? So white on the inside, pretending to be the priestess internally, and externally the empress, in my view as well.
Absolutely. You'll also find as well, I've noticed with this card that, and you see it with a lot of the various cards, that somewhere, well, for example, if you look at the various hands, the left side, or his right, is higher than the other one. So it's this idea that, and I think this speaks to the androgynous nature of all of these various cards,
Of course.
is that, again, like what you're stating, he appears to be one thing. There's an ambiguity surrounding it. We don't really even know if it is a he, because it's so veiled, like every one of the cards, right? Apart from perhaps the Empress and the Emperor. But even with that, their veils are so burdensome and heavy. You can't, again, there's an ambiguity there. And of course, they all have long hair. Another thing to mention as well is this Jungian archetype that you see within the Hierophant of the Senex, the old wise man. And it's this idea of, I guess you could call it this catalyst for change, this again, something you see within the gold as well of the crown. This and of course the yellow of the wise, emblazoned or etched onto the garments of the two below, is this notion of the catalyst of change, the disillusion reformulating into that conjoining between the two separated elements, again leading back to the full, leading back to the ending of the cycle. Another thing to mention as well, you have further feminine symbolism in terms of, look at the top of so you have the inverted omega etched into the top of the columns. Those, of course, look like wombs to me. They look like the anatomical view of a womb, a sort of how you would view it in terms of anatomy.
Yeah, with the ovaries on each side. Yeah, you're correct.
Absolutely. And this omega could also be really with the upper line as well, that upper frame, that lintel above that, could be or argued as the Shen ring, which is an ancient Egyptian symbol which relates to eternality. It relates to that which is a number of infinite scope. So ideas like that. You see as well the three crucifixes above the various sort of main chakra points, right, of the body, leading up, of course, to the crown of the head. You'll notice, so it goes from the bottom of, or essentially the feet or the ankles, and it goes, and then this is what we were mentioning with remember Gimel, in terms of Bach precisions discussion.
Yeah.
That the Gimel, from its pictographic meaning, may relate to walking or the foot. And then it raises up, of course, to the root chakra, then it goes, it seems to either the heart and then the solar plexus, and then above that, of course, is the crown, the Keter. So you have all of that as well.
Sorry, just to interject, it seems like the diamond shape would be the root chakra, right? And then you would have the unequal crucifix as the pleasure chakra, let's say, usually called pleasure or whatever. Then you would have the solar plexus with a slightly more equidistant but still uneven crucifix, and then you have an even crucifix, an equidistant crucifix or cross at the heart. And as you can see, as you go up, the crucifix becomes more equidistant. You see, it starts as let's say, an unequal, sort of what is, I don't know, more seen in Protestant churches, right? That simple cross, which is not, so the vertical shaft is longer than the arms. Then the second one is a bit more equidistant, but not exactly, and the third one is, I believe, supposed to be completely equidistant. So it may also be related to the chakra points that are being depicted. So the diamond would be the complete root material chakra. Then going above, you would have the guttural pleasure chakra, then the solar plexus, then the heart, which would be equidistant. Because the heart, like we saw in the High Priestess, with an equidistant cross, is the central point between all forces, right?
Absolutely, yes. I think as well that ultimately speaks to what the Hierophant is, which is, again, being that Senex, the Jungian archetype of the wise old man. And in this sense, he is the Hierophant, which, of course, relates to well, it's etymologically derives from a Greek compound of words, which means revealer of the sacred, in essence. So he is that which is the bridge between the supernal and the infernal, which of course is all encompassed within the crucifix, which is the horizontal of the earthly conjoined with the vertical of the heavenly, of course. And the fifth point of that is what man is. He is again, if he can raise himself up, he becomes the quaternity, the fourth point of that trinity. This is where you get this idea within the rebus, right at the bottom, the 4 and the 3. So, and you see that, I mean, everywhere really. I mean, even the Hakohen Hagodal, the high priest of the Jewish tradition of the temple, he wears a breastplate which has, all the rows are 3 in number, of course, and of course the columns are 4 in number. So it's the same idea, the 4 and the 3 conjoined. Man, not, well, again, the way the Kabbalists would view it, or the Freemasons, is that man becomes God. But in the spiritual sense, man attains a relationship with God, I think, is a better way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Another thing to mention is this is encompassed within the V, or the 5. So this is the reason, of course, this is the 5th card. It is the pentacle. It is the conjoining, it's that bridge between the two. It's I mean, as the priest as well, or the Hierophant, he bridges, again, like the Pope himself, he bridges that fine line. He is the sort of cosmic, I guess, mediator between both the materialistic desire for power and the spiritual attainment.
Right. And two further details are that it's at the heart level that the bifurcation occurs. So it's right above the heart chakra, let's say, whatever, heart point, that the Y principle, as you've well stated, manifests. So until then, it's unified. Of course, we can see it also as a descending thing, not just an ascending, but I think that we are already in the attempt at ascending in the journey. And another detail is, at his feet, you see two checkered rows. If you see one to the right, one to the left of him.
Well, there's actually four. There's two on the other extremes as well.
Oh, right, correct. Yeah, they almost hidden. Yeah, correct. Yeah. And so those are further details. Of course, the red stone or whatever he set his throne on is also either depicted with or having rosebuds there, right?
It's interesting as well, because I think that has something to do with this youthful energy that is that we see within the Fool. Though it's descending, it's almost like judo, right, in a sort of spiritual or psycho-spiritual way. It's being the youthful energy is being carried. It's again like the water. It is bringing the initiate, or it's the foundation on which the initiate energetically, relates to or taps into to continue on the path. I think the black and white as well. Obviously, it links to this notion of the material, of the dualistic divide, the absence of light, intermixed with that of the fullness of light, or the fullness of colour, rather, the absence of colour with the fullness of colour. So, but both of them are separated. Of course, the grey is the knowledge, it's the temperance of the two, it's the conjoining of the two, hence grey matter, the grey matter of the mind. Another thing to mention as well is that the columns with the various dots on it, it still shows a coarseness. It's not properly hewn yet, and it's not smoothed out, if you will. Another thing to mention as well is the keys, the two keys. So the key, I believe, of, if you will, the mind or the heart, heaven, of the material world, if you will, and interfacing with that in terms of the initiate, interfacing with it, and that of heaven. And I think this also links with what we see in terms of the three, so the head, the right hand of the Hierophant and the left hand, which ultimately links to this idea of Janus, which is interestingly from the Latin where we get our word for janitor from, he who is the doorkeeper, the doorsman. So it's the god of thresholds. This is what Janus is. And in this sense, we see that there's a delineation of time here between the past, the present, and the future, and that which is above it all, of course, with the Ein, the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof Hour, and the psyche itself. And I believe symbolically, what we're seeing with those two keys is ultimately the interfacing of the two, the ability of the initiate to interface with the two, to go beyond those thresholds, which are kept from his access by ignorance. So the keys in this sense would relate to, if you will, wisdom and understanding, hence the wand, or the phallus shape of the shaft of the key, and of course the circular ankh-like symbol, which intimates this bina, or this feminine principle. So the two principles are conjoined, which creates that skeletal framework at the end, which allows, obviously, the door to be unlocked, or the lock of the door to be unlocked, that is. You also see as well, I think, an allusion to the World Tarot card with the fixed signs, right in the centre, at the bottom, with his feet, is those four sort of saltires, you could say. Those, but they're very much like the fixed signs of the or the Persian royal stars that we see on the World Tarot card. And I think, again, that is a further linking to the crucifix, because if you were to view it and jot these out, these various stars, Aldebaran, Regulus, Antares, you would, and in the fourth one, which I forget the name, it's in the Southern Fish constellation, I forget its name now, you will get a crucifix if you intersect all the various lines. Again, intersects into Cassiopeia, Cepheus, Perseus, Andromeda, that area. So I think that's ultimately hearkening back, or it's echoing those ideas that we see in the World Tarot card.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct in all that you've said, in my opinion. And I would add that I think that the Hierophant's mimicry is a hubris, because he thinks that he will ascend or transcend his nature by, following the rituals, knowing the symbols, attaining a completely rational knowledge, in my opinion. When what he has to do is basically become the essence, the nature that he, let's say, was born to be, if you like. But he's trying to transcend. So it's like saying, well, I will prefer a route of ritualistic theater than a route of organic confrontation with what life entails. You understand? Because at least the emperor is very honest, right? The emperor doesn't try to hide that he's a man of war. He's wearing the armor. He's, stern and a fighting man, and so on. So he doesn't hide his intention. But the Hierophant, although he is ascending in the sense that he's trying, at least he's trying, right? And this speaking from a merely philosophical point of view, he is preferring to live a facade, a theater, than confronting his own nature in a more direct way. And I think that this also relates very well with the stages that we see society go through, right? Where we are submerged in a theater at a massified scale, and most of us do prefer to remain in that theater than to confront things that would potentially cause a serious shift in our perception and shake the foundations of our psyche to the point of having to let go of certain personas and certain attachments to, let's say, quote-unquote truths that we took for granted. So I think that this mimicry represents very well the social elements of, at the very least, our times, where we have this structure of hierophants, experts, be them religious, be them, so-called scientific, which entails religious thought anyway, that basically dictate and control and command the truths of the realm, right? And from the foundation of those truths, the behaviors and the self-delusion, in a massified sense, can take place. And you have, in your recent videos, been focusing on the woke culture and so on. And that is, of course, a clear sign of this. But also on the other side, you have, the MAGA types and that sort of thing, which also reflect the same. And this just as an example of one of the several dichotomies that we can observe, right? Of, the right hand and left hand, the red rose monk or the white lily monk, the two keys, right? So all of this is here in this one card, I would say. It represents and it mirrors very well the social situation, at least in the current times of human society.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And, I mean, you see it with the Y shapes throughout. I mean, you see it on the Hierophant's primary sort of, emblazoned chest adornment, with the crucifix rising up that middle point, and also, of course, on the two, I guess you would call them followers, that which are the symbols of the animus and anima. But this idea of the Y is very similar to Orion, the headless god, the slumbering god. This god who is locked within an amnesic state, who doesn't know who he is, or if, he doesn't know of his own divinity. And you see that with the Hierophant, which, again, like this Y principle as well, though it can mean bifurcation, it also seems in this sense, in this context, it seems to be that of the left and the right, without obviously the temperance of the psyche or the mind. And the psyche and the mind in the Hierophant's case, firstly, absolutely, he's raised like an expert above all others, and through tradition he believes that he will attain what is behind him, what eludes him in terms of his perception, which is the arch, or the a symbol of individuation. Of course, as well, the crown is burdensome. It is that which appears like what you're stating as a facade, that he has attained spiritual knowledge, but in fact, he merely has burdened his mind with all of the materialistic wants, with all of the various traditions that masquerade as spiritualism, so on and so forth. But as well, again, the Y shows that.
And material, let's say, branches that also masquerade as spiritual. So, and vice versa. Yeah, but go on. Sorry, just.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, you even see it with the V of the Latin 5 Latin numeral. Again, he's like the chalice. He's open. He's receptive to all knowledge, and he believes by that being that open-minded, or even it goes beyond open-mindedness. It's just this he's a receiver instead of an individual who creates things, instead of an individual who attempts to look at things in a novel or heterodox manner. And again, this is linked to this idea of orthodoxy and the stagnancy that orthodoxy can bring, without the temperance of, obviously, its opposite of the heterodox. I think that's linked with this Y principle. By the way, it's also, you can see this same idea within the sort of Hallul from the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, or the Hallelujah sign that we saw at the Battle of Rephidim in the Old Testament, right? It's this sort of a trident shaped symbol, this trishula or shin letter, where the Hierophant in this case, becomes totally open to all that is above. Again, but he doesn't, again, like the principle of gestation, he only just states that. He limits it within his own mind, but he doesn't fully, and absorb it.
He's pretending.
He's pretending.
He's ritualistic going through it, but not in seriousness. He's not truly, let's say, attaining that understanding. Is just pretending ritualistically that he will, or he is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even adding to what you were saying, and to what I was saying previously as well, and you were saying that the orthodox versus the heterodox, and what we see in the pendulum of society that we've talked about, the oppressor and oppressed, the orthodox tends to become too rigid, and therefore the oppressor will cause it to collapse via the chaos, so dissolve the order into chaos, right? But then when the heterodox come to power and are the oppressors themselves, they become too fluid, so too chaotic, and the orthodox oppressed try to overtake it by imposing order into all that chaos, right? And this becomes a back and forth, and the pendulum of power that we also observe in current times that is unmistakably here in this card.
Absolutely. And another thing to mention as well is the again, this idea of the microcosm and macrocosm. It's something you see also, I guess, also echoed within the Magician card. Essentially every card, but I mean most prominently this card and of course the Magician card. I think as well, I've still to look into it, but the placement of the hand and the heads, the hand and the head, I think is of great importance and within all of these cards. And I think there's astrotheological connections there. I think it's pointing to certain constellations or asterisms as well.
We wanted to have Cupstar with us, but he's busy today. So hopefully he can join us in the next episode. But in the meantime, if he would like to comment upon that doubt, if there is a correlation, we would welcome his comment and his insights onto the astrotheological point of view, for sure. So I think that it's clearly a card that, apart from all that we've stated and the theater and the attempt at ascending from a state of lower masculine emperor to a higher state by mimicking his mother, let's say, we do see the henchmen that one with the red roses, the other one with the white lily, so one with the masculine, the other one with the feminine, try to impose upon the world this theater, this ritual. And this will segue perhaps very well with the card, the next card, the Lovers, where you also see two figures. Of course, in the Hierophant, all of them are supposedly male, but in the Lovers, you do see the male and female clearly depicted, naked, with an angelic kind of figure overseeing them, that seems to be also related to the forces of nature, and with the obvious shining sun above as, the essence overlooking all of creation, right? So what is your, now that we move, unless you have anything more to say about the Hierophant, what do you see?
No, I think we covered most of everything that came to my mind regarding the Hierophant.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the Lovers, what could you state, first of all? Yeah.
Well, this is, I believe, a complete reversal. The way I have always viewed this card is a complete reversal of the Hierophant. It's a complete reversal of, again, the very veiled characters that we see up to this point. And again, you're seeing them naked. There's an innocence there, but they're also looking at each other. Primarily, it's the man looking at the woman, which may say a lot about men's lustful nature. But it's the woman that is looking to the heavens. Interestingly, but both of them have been totally unclothed, meaning they have been, if you will, they've undergone some form of putrefaction, right? There's been a negation of sorts. Now this, in a sense, I believe, is relating to the initiate understanding that what the animus and anima concepts are in their very basic and instinctual or intuitive sense. And I believe what we see in terms of the fire at one side, the burning bush or the burning tree, and that's on the male side, and that of the snake coiling up the tree of the knowledge of good and evil on the feminine side. Obviously, this relates to the Old Testament, but in its very metaphorical and I guess alchemical sense, I think it relates to these two principles that we see I would say accurately drawn up by Steiner, which is the rebel and the tyrant. It's pride and the prejudice of the shadow. It is the passion and that of the limitation of the passion, the gestation of it. Again, through the serpent, through time, through the coiling of time, through the cyclicality of the days or the epochs of both the day and the year, whatever it may be. The microcosm is the macrocosm, and so on and so forth.
Well, I personally don't see it as a reversal of the Hierophant, and I'll explain why. I think that it's the next step in the journey. So he went from emperor to Hierophant, trying to pretend. Then that pretense in the lovers is removed. So Toto, let's say, pulls back the curtain, and you see the naked essence. So where the Hierophant would be is now a mere cloud and a mountain, so there is really nothing there behind the curtain, let's say. And the two monks, or the two pillars even, that would symbolize the masculine and feminine being ritualistically mimicked, are now naked. And behind the woman you would see an apple tree or pomegranate tree, as we've discussed previously, with the serpent coiled around it. And behind the man is what, at least from the shape of the leaves, and correct me if I'm wrong, it could be a fig tree. In fire, yes, in fiery colors, but it seems to me to be perhaps a fig tree. So it seems that it's the next step in the journey. And when we go into the chariot that is already clothed but still has the two, let's say, elements to the fore, is already a different stage of this same development. So first he tries to go there by mimicry. And that mimicry is judged upon, and I think that the angel here is similar to the angel of judgment later on in the judgment card, right? And he is judged, and judged in the sense of, hey, you are lying, you are deceiving yourself, first of all. And so it is revealed that there was nothing there of essence, only of ritual, only of mask. And he becomes naked in the sense of maybe not exactly in the innocence state, but in the sense of, hey, this is really who you are, right? You are the masculine, the feminine. You are this bifurcation manifest with the two pillars, with having to deal with the serpent that is waiting for you on the feminine side. And so I think it's another stage of the journey, one of judgment in the sense of removing the facade, removing the mask. And that's why the sun is present, right? Because where the sun is, nothing can be hidden. Where the sunlight in symbolic terms falls upon, it is revealed, correct? But I don't know if this made sense.
No, I agree. There's something else to mention as well in terms of the tree, the trees that we see, pretty much attached to all three of the various subjects within the picture. I mean, you could even say the mountain is a subject as well, considering its symbolic value, but we'll get to that. There's something to mention about the trees within Jungian psychology. So the Jungian interpretation of this would be that the tree is a symbol, a grand symbol of or even an archetype itself of the human psyche. So the roots would symbolize the unconscious, the chthonic, right? And you also saw that with the Hierophant as well. There was a lot of chthonic elements. Of course, the veil that he wears, the burdensome crown, the burdensome, three-layered, which is also symbolic, priestly garbs. All of that really invokes in one's mind this chthonic or subterranean element that is, of course, ascribed to the unconscious symbolically. This acts as the foundation point, the unseen foundation by which the tree manifests and grows from. And of course, it grows from the dirt. It grows from the mud, from decomposition. Mm-hmm. So that's also very symbolic. It draws its nourishment from the earth. And obviously it provides that nourishment. It carries that nourishment to the conscious experience of the shaft or pillar of the tree. The trunk would represent, again, the conscious self. Mm-hmm. That would be, you could say, the axis mundi in a very metaphorical sense. That is also tied in with the serpent. Again, the serpent is the spine, again, leading from the tailbone or the base all the way up through the abdomen or to the back of the abdomen, acting as a pillar of support to the entire body up to, obviously, the mind. And it carries the nervous system as well in a sort of homeostatic loop. The branches and the leaves would symbolize the expansion of consciousness, the Lichtenberg pattern, the Y principle, again, reaching that threshold of maturity, then bifurcating into its dualistic aspects, which are then paradoxically pitted against one another. It is, it maintains knowledge and creativity in the growth of that, but it also blossoms of the eventual, finite maturation, which leads to the contraction to death. And the fruit, of course, like what we saw within the High Priestess card, with the anterior view, because the pomegranate was cut in half, that represents the culmination of the transmutational alchemical process. Again, in essence, the individuation and the attainment of wisdom, the attainment of knowledge and temperance. So I feel what we see within, for example, the lovers. So the male has destroyed the tree. The tree itself, he is the sort of putrefying aspect of that. And I feel that the feminine, of course, is the opposite of that. So there is that opposition seen within both the male and the female. But interestingly, if you look at the pathway of their gaze, you'll notice that the male is looking to the female. That creates that horizontal line, thus indicating that the male, as we can already see with the contextual symbolism surrounding him, is of the earthly. He looks at the female, who is looking, like the fool, up at heaven, up at this spectre of this solar spectre, this Bacchic spectre, we could say. That creates, I guess, a 45-degree angle, which, again, 4 + 5 = 9. That relates to the ascent. Again, the opposite of the 6, which is the coil and downwards. The 9 is the coil and upwards. And then, of course, that Bacchic spectre that we see, that symbol of divinity or the unconscious being made alive, like what you were saying, that it's being illuminated for both the anima and animus to see, to absorb, to understand. That is looking downwards. So if you carry that, again, because it's vertical, it's the heavenly, but if you carry all of that, it creates the number 4. If you were to follow that gaze, which of course links with what we were talking about with, for example, the fruit, the culmination of the Trinity becoming the quaternity of man understanding, going beyond the ignorance of amnesia and understanding his own divinity. So that is also hidden within the Lover Tarot card. And of course, you see the materialistic manifestation of that heavenly within the mountain, which from, of course, Capricorn, we understand, is that of the sea-goat. So that which dwells within the abyss, but can also ascend any vertical peak. So again, as an archetype of enlightenment. The mountain within Jungian psychology would be the path to self-realization, this idea of the journey to individuation, to knowledge of the self, of course, as well, the overcoming of the obstacles of that and things such as that.
Yeah.
So understanding, attaining an understanding of the unconscious aspect of oneself, the divinity.
And it could also be as well the decomposition, let's say, the deconstruction of the throne. Both the emperor and the Hierophant's throne became just a pile of, the stone decomposed, let's say, the stone destroyed, and just a pile of stone making up the mountain, because now it was revealed. Now the facade was taken away, the veil was removed, right? And as the veil was removed, usually there are choices to be made, because now you see the naked truth of yourself. You see you can't lie to yourself anymore and say that you are either the emperor or the Hierophant or whatever. You have to take up the actual nature that is there and do something with it. And you stated very well that the masculine is looking at the feminine, and the feminine is looking at the heavens. But it is through them both that they have to, it's like the two trees, whether we consider the pomegranate tree, and I don't know if it's a fig tree or something else, they have to become a new forest, these two trees. Of these two trees, they have to make a new forest. And of course, I'm talking in the psyche. It has to bear fruit in the psyche now. It is not just a pretense, it is not just a ritual, it is not just a game of power and a game of what I would consider my self-interest, which is, of course, usually in those terms not a self-interest, but a lower, at least manifestation of what would be perceived as self-interest. And now it has to go beyond that. It has to really be able to look at the naked truth, integrate it in some way, and move forward from that. And of course, we see that in the next card, and I'm not moving to it yet, but just to state the journey in the next card of the Chariot. Now you're moving forward, right? Now you've constructed something from that nakedness, and you're able to move forward. And the Chariot, of course, implies motion, implies even locomotion, right? Of moving towards somewhere that before, because they are here in the garden static, right? They're not moving. They're in a state of, what the hell happened here? I'm this after all, and now I have to recheck my bearings. But in the Chariot, they're already moving. So they are trying to cope with what was revealed from the previous facade, in my opinion. And this, of course, to give a different perspective, more perhaps less symbolic in that sense, but more practical in the psychological meaning.
There's another thing to mention as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we see and when we were in Portugal, we saw, of course, these illustrations of Yahweh.
Yes.
And of course, it's even mentioned in the Old Testament that there's a cloud round him. And I mean, in a metaphorical or semiotic sense, in terms of, in terms of the emblem of what that would, entail, it essentially is the unconscious. So what we're seeing with that spectre is the tree of life. So you have the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and you have the burning bush. Mm-hmm. Both of these are, like what you intimated throughout what you stated there. It is this notion of of generation limitation, of these various dualisms, reaching back to the tree of life, which is the birthplace of it all, which established it all, which is both creativity and destruction in its very foundational sense, and it is the noumenal singularity of that. So that's why it wears the grey cloak as well. I mean, the grey is the same thing we saw with the Hierophant. It's the bridging between those separate forms,
the white
those
and black,
separate forces. Absolutely. Another thing to mention is the red wings, and it's because with it in that sort of again, that very chalice-like shape, you could say taking or absorbing, like a chalice would water, the rays of the sun above it. It's this same principle of Bina. And you could even say there's, with the closed eyes of this spectre, she is again, the unconscious is introspective. It's still unawakened, but it's introspectively contemplating within the cave of its own unconscious void. And it's beginning to understand who it is and what it is. It's beginning to, like what we see of the lovers, there's not that lovers, though there's that aspect of chaotic energy and lust, there's a more tempered understanding of a relationship, of a bond that's being formed between the anima and the animus. So they're no longer these distinct and separate entities like what we see of the black and the white. There's a conjoining, a confluence of the two, an entwining of it. You could say like the caduceus. This is what we see of the caduceus symbolism, I believe. The red wings are also seen on the temperance card,
and the
but
judgment.
We'll get to that, and the judgment. We'll get to that later on, and I'll touch upon that in those in those episodes. But another thing to mention is there's, with the tree of life, the middle figure, she still has her hands, but they're slowly beginning to descend. She still has those hands in that sort of Hallul or Hallelujah trishula shape, again similar to the chalice, right? It's that which is receptive. She's beginning to lower that down, and she's beginning to take, she's almost at the crucifix sort of sign, right? Again, the conjoining. She's no longer just a receiver. She is the complete and utter, the full package, if you will, psycho-spiritually. She can create as well as receive. There's also a sort of Bacchic sense to it all. And though it could be seen as fire, or perhaps even figs, it could also be seen as a very Bacchic symbol of, again, chaos, right? Dionysian as well. It could also be seen as the fall.
Well, sorry to interrupt. The angel looks very Dionysian because of the leaves in the hair that formed sort of those horns.
Yes.
That would resemble the horns of Dionysus as well. So it could very well be.
I thought so, yeah. But of course, that doesn't really tie in with the lovers itself, because the lovers again there's lust there, but there's more of an understanding, a bond. But there perhaps could be that same chaotic energy that we saw of the Hierophant with the red parapet, I guess, or the red raised plinth below him. So it could be Dionysian. It could also be relating to the fall or autumn. This idea of, like what we see, it's the number 6, this card anyway. Again, the further descent, right? The 6 in its very pictographic sense is a coil, or it's part of a coil or a descent downwards. Another thing as well, it's very androgynous, again, like the assured and very confident, yet pretending. Hierophant, the great pretender, he or she or they, you can see with the you notice with the neck, you can almost see that Adam's apple, the V shape. That is, again, like what you've stated, very Dionysian. It's something we see with the Statue of Liberty as well.
Are we doing transvestigation to the angel now?
Yeah, the transvestigation of alchemical transvestigation. Man, that is some title. But yeah, I believe that there is that aspect there of the potential once the spectre awakens, or it comes out of its introspection and it projects that epiphany of the noumenal and phenomenal essence that it is, in a conjoined sense.
Yes, and you make a good point about the autumn, because if I'm not mistaken, the pomegranates are an autumn fruit. It could be correlated there for sure. With the autumn, and of course the fiery leaves on the right could also be the golden leaves of autumn, regardless if they're fig or something else. It correlates correctly with what you've stated about this could mean the autumn as well, in a autumn in the seasonal sense, but also in a psychological sense, right? When the leaves fall, when the sort of facade of summer drops, right? And it is unmasked as the sheer reality of the coming winter. I think that you have hit upon something with the Dionysian figure, and I think the Dionysian figure here would be the angel above that reveals the facade of the previous cards, at least the previous two cards at the very least, because he is revealing by making them naked, and the man is of course focused more on the woman's body, let's say, so on the sexual part, and the woman is looking towards Dionysus, this Dionysian figure, for a sort of guidance on how to proceed, let's say, how to go about this expansion, because like I said, the next card will be a card of motion. And so this is a time for, let's say, being naked, but at the same time, it's the last moment before the next journey, the last moment where they can have some respite, right? Where they can, okay, now it's time to stop what you were doing before and reevaluate your nakedness, reevaluate who you are behind all the masks that you have put in front of your face, and all the garments that you have chosen to wear in pretense instead of in truth. Right now, look at yourselves naked. Take a moment, take a break, and reevaluate and make a decision. Right. And I think that the lovers have been associated with decisions in cartomancy, right? So I think that is also a point. But this revelation, this angel of revelation, unlike the temperance one and the judgment one that you've also mentioned, is very Dionysian for sure. So he reveals through the basic impulses that everything that was ritualistic before was just a facade, due to you have to contend with the basic nature of who you are, and you are man and you are woman, right? I think that is also intriguing about it.
It could be this as well, this idea of the Hieros Gamos, which is the sacred or divine marriage, and this spectre of the unconscious seems to be officiating this divine wedding in many ways. And again, I will mention actually the red wings just very very briefly. You notice that unlike what we saw within the Hierophant, where the left side, his right hand was higher than obviously than his right, or pardon me, his left, our right. The reverse is true here.
Mm-hmm.
So in this sense, and you also see, by the way, that the male tree is higher than the female. So I think what this, and again, this links to the red lipstick that we see with this solar emanation, this perhaps Bacchic emanation of the unconscious, which is that with the red, in Jungian psychology, and you could even say alchemy, actually, because I think Jung just probably took this from alchemy directly. We see this idea of the red being that energy that is inherent within the fool, and it carries throughout the descent, and it's something that spurs the descent. Again, like the red leaves of fall, or which carries, which when it falls to the ground, it is subsumed, nourishing the ground, and it creates new expressions of life, and it's cradled by the winter. And then after that does spring, blossom. It's from that subsumation of the leaves of the fall, which act as sort of mulch or nourishment. It's the same principle of these red wings. It's with the red itself and the fire. It is that this libido, this spiritual libido, if you will, this energy can ensure that we transcend beyond the material world, and we understand that the material world is just not all that we are. There is something beyond us. There is something which, penetrates, and which we are a permutation of. And again, I think that's what that red symbolizes, what the fire symbolizes as well. And of course, within the tree of life, the hair, the horns, or the crown of either autumn, or the crown of the fire. That's what that symbolizes. Another thing to mention as well is the Orphic egg. This idea that we see in terms of the egg. So it's made up of 4 parts, right? And I won't go into all the 4 parts. They link to the 4 elements, essentially. The air is the crevice between the two. The white on the outside is the stability of the earth, and so on and so forth, down to obviously the fire element of the yolk. And then that viscous liquid surrounding it is the water, the mercury, the prima materia. So that's where the Orphic egg, or world egg symbolism derives from. But in terms of what we see here, in terms of the solar emanation here, this spectre, this Bacchic spectre, is that of the yolk. It's the same symbol as the fire, right? It's the same symbol as the spiritual culmination, the noumenal element that you cannot see within the egg, but which nourishes the egg. Again, like the roots of the tree. And this is why I believe that we see greater emphasis placed upon the red and the yellows within this piece. And of course why the branches, the fiery branches of the male tree is higher than the female in this case. You'll notice as well that the feminine is very much like an Andromeda-like character, because firstly she almost stands like Andromeda in many cases. She's looking up and asking why, but you'll notice the serpent as well. It's very much like a G, right? It looks like a G from my perspective. Again, linking to the Freemasonic G. The G is the 7th letter. It also, you mentioned it perhaps could be the coil, which in this case would be very contextually true. And it also links to the Gamma and Gimel within the Semitic and Greek alphabets, respectively, which is the 3rd letter. So it's very important. 3 and 7 are quite important numbers, as we've already covered. And you'll notice that the serpent is right at the head of the serpent is at either the base of the neck, or the base of the skull rather, or at the brain. and you'll notice that it ascends from those Piscean feet, which they're very much, both the male and the female, they look like the Piscean fish. One is moving vertically and one is moving horizontally, and of course it's in that same shape of the four, that same shape of the Pythagorean right-angled triangle. Again, the 90-degree right-angled triangle, the 9, that of ascension. If you're at the bottom, the lowest point, the only way you can go is through ascension. And of course, that's why the 6 is at the top, at the center of the sun, in the abstract area of the monad, because 6 is the descent. The only way you can go from up is down. And it's similar to the magician, like what we saw. The bottom of the white and the red is growing upwards, seeking to go up, but the heavenly is seeking to descend down. So it's the sort of paradox that we see, that God sought to know himself by descent. So he sought the descent, but we seek to know God, so we seek the ascent. And of course the two hopefully meet in the middle through the Eros Gamos, through this divine marriage.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and from here, unless you have something more to add, from here we can move to the chariot, the next card, which, like I stated, it's different in the sense that while the previous one was a revelation that they had to contend with their actual natures, but it was also a static card, so they are in the nature as they are, so they're not moving anywhere. Now the chariot represents the motion, and it would seem the more civilized type of motion. So before, in the emperor, you had sort of the despotism, right? And with the Hierophant you had the theocracy. Then there's a revelation, and the chariot represents the initiation of civilization, right? Of cities, as we see in the background, and of a more centralized type of human society. And so in that sense, the figure in the chariot is a sort of emperor or empress, because it's also androgynous. And the two sphinxes ahead represent again the light and dark, the male, female, etc., that we've seen in the previous cards, but now sort of subjugated to make the chariot move, to make the civilization move forward, right? It is again, so the facade returned, the pretense returned, but it returned in a more sophisticated manner, right? Also, you see, of course, at the center of the chariot, you see the shield again, this time not heart-shaped, and it has the wings and the orb, something that we sort of correlates with the high priestess that had the orb at the center, and the two sort of kind of horn things that could, it's more or less in the shape of these wings. And you have it seems to be the miller's stone, isn't it? In the center, red miller's stone.
It does appear, yeah, that's what it looks like.
Because
yeah,
civilization is based upon agriculture or the harnessing of the making of bread, right? The harnessing of the agricultural produce to make the secondary, manifestation of food, for example, which sustains the civilization. So these are my first impacts with, and of course at the top of the chariot you have these drapes with the stars symbolizing a fake sun, a fake sky. So it's not like this civilization actually has been looking at the true sky above, but has fabricated its own sky, right? It fabricates everything. It's enclosed within a chariot that keeps moving, and not in the natural world. So it came from that revelation and fell again into a more sophisticated kind of facade, in my opinion. But go ahead and tell me what you think.
Well, the way I view the chariot card, now, we have to understand when we're talking about the chariot as, firstly, a piece of technology, it was radical when it was developed. It radically transformed both warfare, and of course, in time, it radically transformed logistical through the car, logistical, and also you could even say agricultural technologies as well, because all of that branched off or was contained within the cart or the chariot, technological innovation. So it radically transformed everything, and that's why I see, for example, a lot of the solar deities they all carry the sky vis-a-vis their chariot. So the chariot itself, like the wheels and the spokes of the chariot, they are this instance, this instantiation, this intimation of the idea of the day and the night cycle, of cyclicality. And interestingly enough, you actually see that sort of very subtly stated in terms of the charioteer being itself most likely the earth in that sense, due to, well, for example, you see the zodiacal belt that he wears, beginning, I believe that's from Libra all the way to, I can't quite rightly see the last one, but from the left one it's Libra.
No, it's Leo. It's Leo. Then it's Cancer.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Leo,
yep,
Cancer,
yep.
Gemini, I would say. Perhaps. I can't see clearly here. Then the other one is more or less indistinguishable, and then you have a moon shape at the end. So it maybe it's not zodiacal per se, but indication of a certain conjugation in the sky. So it's for sure Leo and Cancer, the first two, and then the last three maybe Cupstar can infer. Of course, his arm or his wristbands are aquatic, at least, right, with the shells.
Yeah, they're that fluted sort of shape. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's the same, and you also see with the crescent of the moon. But it seems as though one side is smiling, one side is unhappy, which again could link to this idea of the persona of the spectrum, the polarizing spectrum of the extremes of all the various archetypes. And then above him is obviously the canopy of the stars. And of course all of the stars are either six-pointed hexagrams or pentagrams, pentacles rather, of the 5 points.
And the 8-pointed star above his head, which would be the solar kind of star, right? So representing a representation of the solar within the psyche, I would say. But to me it is relevant, like I stated, that the sky is not the actual sky, because easily the artist could have represented a starry sky behind him. But no, the sky is draped, designed on drapes. So it is a false sky, and this I think is very, very relevant symbolically, because it's a false sky that he's looking or that he has above his head. It's not the actual sky. He's disconnected again. He's disconnected himself again, and humanity has disconnected itself again from the actual nature after the revelation. So this is, again, this would probably be the zenith point of this part of the journey, and it's going to start descending again.
There's also something to mention as well regarding, so you've got the 4 pillars at either side, and then he's the 5th point. You see the same thing as well with, again, above the laurel wreath, which we've already mentioned, I believe, in the Empress card. This idea, the laurel wreath is that of the materialistic Caesar figure. And then above that is that of the supernal Caesar, the supernal king. And then again, that's four horns or 4 protrusions from that crown, with obviously the 5th point being that rainbow, that arch. Again, linking to individuation. You see that from the Bifrost Bridge within Norse mythology, of the conjoining of all the disparate aspects of the psyche into a unified, holistic essence, if you will. But the 8 as well could also link to the Star of Ishtar. It could, which funnily enough is where we get the star from, Ishtar. And moreover as well, it could link to the Sumerian cuneiform Dingir, which is the silent cuneiform letter or figure that was used to symbolize God or goddess. That's literally what it means, I believe. So you have that sense, which above that which is above the earth, that which is above that which is below, is that of a god. And again, the charioteer, though he holds that upon his crown, his keter, his head, he is not fully aware of it because he's still looking at the initiate. Or maybe he's trying to beckon the initiate to of course, understand who he is, which is, of course, what all the various tarot cards do. So the moon on either side is this principle of the waxing and the waning, the cycles of the moon, which both end, I believe, if my astronomy serves me correctly, in both those crescent shapes reversed. Again, the same principles of generation and limitation, and the conjoining of the two, the overlap of the two, the showing that the opposites themselves are mere illusions. They are reflections of one another. Just like Cassiopeia views her reflection, we ourselves are our reflection of the divine. So again, that's the 4, the 5th, the spirit. There's interesting shapes upon the tunic, the lapels of the tunic, or whatever you would call them, the straps. But I'm unsure what they are, but they look quite interesting. The square is in the centre at the heart, showing that though he may have smoothed the stone, and showing that though he may have purified as well his self, he is still contained within the liminal. Or not the liminal, more the material rather. Again, that is also found within the context of both the hewn stone that he seems to be encased within, and also the various the land that he sits upon, the sea behind him, and of course the civilization behind him too. As you quite rightly mentioned, you see the red of the millstone, which grinds the kernels,
the grain,
yeah, which has been separated from the chaff through typically capillary motion or threshing. It grinds that. I believe it's red because in essence it's the same as idea as the red wings. It's that sort of spiritual energy which can transcend, which lifts you up. Another thing to mention as well is this idea of control with the charioteer. The charioteer exerts control in this sense over the conscious and the unconscious, which have been, again, because they're sitting with their tail between their legs, they've been subdued in that sense. So the unconscious has been subdued. And also another thing to mention as well, notice that he has no red lipstick on now, meaning from the Egyptian funerary rites, he's no longer dead. He's going into, he's consciously manifesting the unconscious, or he's beginning to. And of course, the unconscious aspects of the black and the white still wear the red lipstick, because they are, of course, the dead aspects that he has to carry with him, or he uses as momentum. He uses the destruction as momentum, like what we saw in the Lovers card with the burning tree. He uses that fire as momentum to carry himself forward, which is also, I guess, encapsulated with that idea of the circle and the millstone, which is the millstone, the circular millstone with the spindle.
Yes.
Turning it round.
Yes, he has subjugated, but not resolved. The two unconscious opposites, let's say. Well, not unconscious, but subconscious
they're still
forces.
Separate.
Yeah, they're still separate, but they're subjugated in the sense that he has imposed his will upon them, and has imposed a new theater, a new facade, a new false sky, a new false house for his existence. And he will still have to contend with his nature, which will be seen in the cards that will come next, and we'll probably go into in the next episode of the strength. I am assuming the strength because we're following the Rider-Waite, and it would make to me more sense than being the what was the other one that was replaced? The Temperance, was it?
Yes, Temperance, yeah, I believe. Yeah.
Let me just check.
Yeah, it's
no, the
Justice.
Justice.
Yes,
Justice was
sorry.
replaced with Strength. So,
Yes.
To me it makes more sense that Strength comes after this, because in the journey sense he has subjugated those two naked figures. In a sense, this card, to be honest, I relate it to the Devil, because it is a card of subjugation, and it doesn't seem like the Sphinxes are tied up in any way, so they're voluntarily being subjugated. They have accepted being subjugated, in the same way that in the Devil card you see the two figures. Although they are chained, the chain is very loose, so they could easily walk away, remove the chain and walk away, and they don't. They prefer to remain there. So I think that these two subjugated elements of the psyche have decided to volunteer for this new facade, and pretend that this charioteer of civilization is the new god. And this again will have to be contended later on with the animal and natural impulses that will be seen in Strength, as you have to regulate the lion, let's say, the force, the natural force of your repressed self, just like the Ophiuchus, right? So the Strength card could relate to the Ophiuchus, although it's apparently of course a woman wrestling with the lion. But to me it's very relatable to the card of the Devil, this chariot here. It's like a better version of what we'll later see in the Devil.
Another thing to mention as well is that they're chimeric. So it's the conjoining of the bestial aspects of man at the lower point, which is obviously the lion, which is what we see within the Strength. It's also linked, of course, to Leo. It's
they will revolt.
The passion.
They are subjugated now, but they will revolt. Sorry.
Yes, if they're not conjoined. Yes. Yeah. Another thing to mention is that the millstone just came to my mind. It's also, within Hinduism, it's also a representation of the yogi and the lingam, which is again another representation of the union of opposites. You see that with Shiva has a certain lingam which shows the conjoining through a destructive sense. It's black. It's this conjoining of the male and the female, of Parvati and Shiva. Another thing to mention is the winged disc. It's essentially this idea after the emblazoning on the shield. So in that essence, the fruition of that union of opposites, of the conjoining of those two sphinxes, which are adjacent either side, you will attain the Philosopher's Stone. You will attain that abstract peace, which is gained once the various dualism, or the polarities rather, have been
The
bridged.
dot, yeah, it represents the dot in my view, as in the High Priestess card. The dot is represented on the headdress.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to mention as well is that within both Persia, ancient Persia, Egypt, and I believe in some places in northern India, it was that winged disc, and also in Atonism, when the Hyksos came to power, and the crypto-Hyksos within Akhenaten, that was considered a symbol, or a very endearing symbol of royalty, of divinity, of divine royalty, really. This idea of the divine right to rule and things such as that. So we've mentioned the epaulets, the lunar epaulets. Yes, another thing to mention as well is that what we see in terms of the laurel crown and the crown of stars and the canopy of stars above, with of course the void of space, it seems, above, or the void of the unconscious is another aspect of it, is that it may relate to this victory over the temporal plane, that at that point within the chariot card, you realise, even if in an indistinct way, that you are perhaps in this world but not of it. So you're beginning to assage or make amends for the amnesia that you've felt from, again, congenitally from birth. Another thing to mention as well is the scepter. So that's a wand or scepter, like what we've mentioned previously with the wand. This representation of, it could be a representation of the of Earth, I believe. Earth. So this wand or scepter is much like what we see within the Emperor card. Again, it's a symbolization of power. It symbolizes rigidity, that which is like the tree but is artificial, and it's been artificiated through the likes of civilization. So it represents the sovereign's temporal power, and it's associated with governance, it's associated with authority, with the principle of kingship. That is, you could say, linked to Jupiter. It's also linked to Saturn as well, with the likes of the mythology surrounding the Saturnia Regna, or the kingdom of Saturn. But it's worth noting that the scepter almost acts as the reins of the charioteer, because he actually holds no reins.
Yes, yes, it's
and
voluntary.
Again, yeah, and again, as stated, the chariot is almost, or the charioteer is almost encased in this stone. So it's
he
almost
can't
like
leave. Yeah,
exactly. It's the confines of the civilization, which is obviously at the backdrop of him. So it's the control over, from a psychological sense, it's the control over the will or the mind in its purest sense. But it's also the understanding that the will and the mind ultimately control the body of man, control the earth, or control, in this case, the wand. It's the same sort of symbolism. And that there is still a confine that we need to breach, hence the cube, hence the box. That he's above the box, right, the encasement, at least partially, but he's not yet fully emerged as a sort of statue from the box, right, from this stone sarcophagus that he's within, this encasement of stone. So again, it's like the sculptor. He has to take that chisel, that fire, that redness of the transcendent quality of his will, and chisel away at the natural ego, to thus get to the individuated self.
Yes, he is moving, so the civilization itself is moving, but not with its own legs. It's moving through the technology that it made for itself and through the prison that it made for itself. Because, of course, technology has two sides. It, on one side, frees man from certain labors or certain difficulties, but it also imprisons man because it creates a dependency on that particular technology. So he sort of is legless, right? He can't move on his own. He can only move if civilization moves, if the chariot moves. So if these two sphinxes, if these two lions, let's say, revolt, and they will, then he has to start again, right? He falls. He is unable to proceed. So this to me really represents the high point. So first we were descending up until, or down until, the emperor, and now we ascended a little bit in a curve, in a sort of zigzag, right? We ascended a little bit, and this is the zenith of this step, which is the civilization, let's say, that is based upon subservience, subjugation, yes, but voluntarily so. The sphinxes were convinced that their needs would be better met by subjugation. And they will eventually realize that, in fact, no. They will realize, because it's in their impulses to be who they are and not who they pretend to be, right? Again, as an overarching psychological analysis of this.
Another thing as well that's quite interesting is it's almost the trapezoidal shape of the breastplate, which is something we see with, of course, the unfinished pyramid with the capstone above. So it's this essence of, or this emblem rather, of the trapezoid, which itself is a very terrifying image for the spectator because it feels incomplete. So it's this, we're hearkening or echoing the same sort of sentiments that he's not, or she is not quite there yet, because there is quite a lot of lunar symbolism here. Another thing to mention regarding the riddle of the Sphinx, and that was made famous by the myth of Oedipus, which of course Freud, for very perverse reasons, obviously took much inspiration from. So it's that riddle of the Sphinx, which states, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? And obviously the answer is man. And it's this idea of the aging of man, the descent of man, as he grows older. But in a spiritual sense, it also seems to relate, or convey rather, this sense of the more you whittle down in terms of your body, the more that you understand yourself, the more you gain a general wisdom surrounding who you are, knowledge of self. And again, that can be transcribed, or transposed rather, to a knowledge of the environment, because the environment itself is controlled by the perception of the psyche. So
absolutely, the perception is the key, and it is based, because he built this chariot and this encasement out of false truths, right? He invented the sky, he invented a truth to live within, right? So in a perception sense, he invented a new world to live within, right? And this world only exists in their perception, right? Not in the actual world outside, only in their perception. But it manifests as, the civilization that is behind them, the cities, the walls, the regulated nature that seems to have been completely conquered by this false idea. But eventually it will be manifest as false, and it will crumble, because nothing that is false will last. Only the truth will, right? So absolutely agreed, man. I don't know if you have any more remarks on the chariot.
No, I think we've covered everything. I mean, the chariot wheels are, of course, the two columns, but again, that's a symbol that's essentially universal to them all. Another thing to mention is that we see right at the very, I guess it would be the eastern, well, it's the westernmost to us, but I guess it would be the easternmost in terms of how one could view, or how one views Cassiopeia in the night sky. So from Aldebaran to Antares, so from the east to the west, or Antares would be the west, Aldebaran would be the east, but it's sort of flipped from our perspective. We actually you see that it's a very faint white line, sort of, you know, going down the left side of that castle wall. It almost appears to be some sort of dawn or a sunset or something along those lines.
But it spreads. I think, to be honest, I think it might be a printing problem, because it spreads all the way down, it seems. Because
it goes through
goes through the trees as well, and so it might be just misprinting.
It may be. Yeah. Yes, it may be
of some sort. Yeah.
But I think that's pretty much it. Obviously, it being 7 as well is quite important. Yeah. In terms of the enneagram or heptagram. But we mentioned that in box discussion, live stream.
Yeah, and as a final remark, look how miserable the sphinxes look.
Yes, yeah.
They think, we've subjugated for our, improvement, but we're actually miserable because we're not being ourselves. And so they will revolt.
well, this is another thing to mention in terms of astrology or astrotheology. This sign, or this tarot card rather, is linked to the water sign of Cancer. Yeah. So it's, again, under the Babylonian star catalogue, it was referred to as, I guess, the gateway to the underworld. It is the height of summer, but within that sort of fervour, which is shown with civilization, within that height of civilization, is the creeping understanding that we're not quite done with the descent. We're not quite done in terms of the solar traversal, through the underworld and such. And its ruling planetary body is the moon as well. But you see that within the epaulets and other such, the fluted, shell-like van braces that he wears too.
Yeah. Yes, man. I think that my cat is. She always shows up. Yeah, she always shows up when I'm recording. But I think we've covered it, most of it, at least. If we, in the meantime, recall something that may have missed, we can add later on in later shows. Let's hope Cubstar is able to make it to the next episode. It would be great to have him around for the astro-theological side of things. So we've covered the Hierophant, the Lovers, and the Chariot in this episode. It's a pleasure as always, Silas.
Yeah, it's been an absolute fascinating discussion, and I thank you.
Thank you. So everyone, thank you for being here in another episode, and I hope to see you all in the next episode as well.